Here is Afrasiab. Today we are going to solve Cambridge IGCSE Physics Paper 4 Theory Extended, held on October-November 2016, and paper code is 0625 with variant 41. So let's start from question number 1. Question number 1. An astronaut on the moon drops a feather from rest off the top of small cliff. The acceleration due to gravity on the moon is 1.6 meter per second square. There is no air on the moon. Part A. The feather falls for 4.5 seconds before it hits the ground. Part 1. On figure 1.1, draw the speed time graph for the motion of falling feather. So first of all, it is given that feather is dropped from rest. It means that initially it is at rest, it is not moving. So the initial speed will be equal to 0. The acceleration due to the gravity is given at the surface of moon. It is 1.6 meter per second square, and time also be given before the feather hits the ground. So I write here acceleration is equal to 1.6 meter per second square and time is 4.5 seconds. And here on figure 1.1, it's a speed time graph. It means that first of all we have to find out the speed by using the value of acceleration and time. I write here A is equal to delta V over T. Here will be V minus U over T, where V is the final speed and U is the initial speed. As the feather is at rest initially, so the initial speed will be equal to 0. I write here V minus 0 over T. So V will be equal to A multiplied by T. The acceleration is 1.6 meter per second square and time is 4.5. So that the value of speed comes to be 7.2 meter per second. It means that before 4.5 second, which is at this point, the speed is 7.2 meter per second. Here it is 7 and this point is 7.2. And it is also given that acceleration is 1.6 meter per second square. It is the constant acceleration. Constant acceleration means that speed is uniform. So I draw here a straight line that starts from the origin because initially the feather is at rest. So I draw here the graph. So this graph is a straight line. Going towards the next part. Part 2. Determine the distance fallen by the feather. So here we have to find out the total distance that is fallen by the feather. So as it is given in figure 1.1, it's a speed time graph and the area under speed time graph is equal to the distance covered by the feather. I write here distance fallen will be equal to area under graph So first of all, we have to find out the area under this graph. For that, here I draw a line. we can see that it's a triangle and we have to find out the area of triangle. So the area of triangle is basically half base multiplied by height. On the speed time graph, base is time and height is speed. So I write here half time multiplied by speed. At this point, time is 4.5 seconds. So it will be 1 over 2, 4.5 multiplied by speed, which is at this point, speed is 7.2. So area will be equal to half 4.5 multiplied by 7.2. I write here, it will be equal to 1 over 2, 4.5 multiplied by 7.2, which comes to be 16.2 meters. So the distance will be equal to 16.2 meter. Going towards the next part, part B. On figure 1.2, sketch the shape of the speed time graph for the same feather falling on the earth. Now this feather falls on the earth and we have to draw the speed time graph. So first of all, we know that the value of acceleration is 9.8 meter per second square, and this is the value of acceleration due to gravity when there is no air resistance. But when the feather falls, there will be the air resistance in this case. So the value of acceleration changes and it does not remain equal to 9.8 meter per second square. Means that the value of acceleration does not remain constant. So there will be a graph that due to the air resistance. So this graph is basically with decreasing gradient. I am going to draw this. So this graph will be like this. Next part C. Explain the difference between the speed and velocity. Include the words vector and scalar in your answer. So, vector is a quantity which has both magnitude and direction. Plus direction. While the scalar has only magnitude. We have to differentiate between the speed and velocity. Speed is a scalar quantity, while velocity is a vector quantity. It means that speed has only magnitude, while the velocity has both magnitude and direction. So I write here, speed has only magnitude, while velocity has both magnitude and direction. So this is the main difference between the speed and velocity. Question number 2. Figure 2.1 represents the cross-section of an oil tanker in a river. Here is the figure 2.1 and there is a oil tanker in the river. Part A. The bottom of the tanker is 15 meters below the surface of the water. The area of the bottom of tanker is 6000 meters square. The density of water is 1000 kg per meter cube. Part 1. Calculate the pressure due to the water at the depth of 15 meters. So first of all, here we are given the area of the bottom of the tank and also the height of the tank from the surface of the water. And we have to calculate the pressure due to the water at the depth of 15 meters. So we know the formula of pressure, that pressure is the multiplication of density, acceleration due to gravity and depth. I write here pressure is equal to density multiplied by g and h, where rho is density, g is acceleration due to gravity and h is depth. So the density of water is given, which is 1000 kilogram per meter cube. So I write here 1000 multiply the value of g is 10 meter per second square. And the depth is given, which is 15 meter. So I write here 15. So that the value of pressure comes to be 150,000 Pascal. I can also write this pressure as 150 multiplied by 10 की power 3 Pascal, and 10 की power 3 here is basically equal to kilo. So I write here 150 kilopascal. The value of pressure will be equal to 150 kilopascal. Next, part 2. Calculate the force due to the water pressure on the bottom of the tanker. So here we have to calculate the force. We know that pressure is force per unit area. I write here pressure is equal to force over area. From here we have to find out the value of force, and pressure we already calculate in part first. It is equal to 150 kilopascal. So I write here force is equal to pressure multiplied by area. The value of pressure is 150 and 000 multiplied by area. Here it is given that the area of the bottom of tanker is 6000 meters square. So I write here 6000. And the value of force comes to be 9.0 into 10 की power 8 Newton. I can also write this force as 9.0 into 10 की power 5 multiplied by 10 की power 3 Newton. Again 10 की power 3 is kilo. So it will be 9.0 into 10 की power 5 kilonewton. I write here force is equal to 9.0 into 10 की power 5 kilonewton. Next, part 3. Deduce the weight of the tanker. So here we have to find out the weight of tank, as it is given that the weight of this tank is acting in downward direction, and there is a force that is exerted due to the water that we calculate in part 2. It is acting in upward direction. So both of these are equal. It simply means that the weight of the tanker will be equal to the force due to the water pressure on the bottom of tanker. So I write here this force is actually the upthrust force. So I write here weight will be equal to upthrust, that is 9.0 into 10 की power 5 kilonewton. So weight will be equal to 9.0 into 10 की power 5 kilonewton. Going towards the next part. Part B. The tanker sails out on a calm sea. The density of sea water is greater than the density of river water. So here it is given that density of sea water is greater than the density of river water. State and explain any change in the depth of the bottom of the tanker below the surface. So when the density of sea water is greater than the density of river, what will be the effect on the depth? First of all, here I consider two tankers. This is first tanker while there is another tanker. The weight of both of these tankers are equal and it is acting in downward direction. I suppose that this weight is equal to 120 Newton and here is also 120 Newton. The difference is that first tanker is placed in the river water. Here is river water. And the other tanker is in sea water. It is given that the density of sea water is greater than the density of river water, as the weight of both of these tanks are acting in downward direction, and as a result the water apply force which is in upward direction, and it is also be known as upthrust. So there will be the force in upward direction on both of these tanks. The magnitude of this force depends upon the density of river water and sea water. So greater the value of density, greater will be upthrust force. And the density of sea is greater than the density of river water. It means that the force that is exerted by the sea water is greater as compared to the force that is exerted by the river water. So I suppose that this force has 170 Newton magnitude, while this force is 130 Newton. So here we can simply see that the force that is exerted by the sea water is greater as compared to the river water. So in the sea water, the force is much greater than the weight. It means that small amount of this object will be there under sea water. So this is the depth in this case, and when the force is 130 Newton and weight is 120, so in this case force is greater than weight. But in this case the upward force is greater. It means that greater amount of object will be here inside the river water. So this region is inside the river water, which means that the depth of the tanker in the sea water here is smaller as compared to the depth in the river water. So I write here depth in sea water is smaller as compared to river water. It is because of the density. So I write here as the density of sea water is greater than the density of river water. So sea water will apply greater upthrust force due to which depth of the tanker in sea water is less than the depth in river water. Question number 3, part A. A closed container hold a quantity of gas. Explain in terms of the momentum how molecules of the gas exert a force on walls of the container. So here we have to describe in terms of momentum that why the gas molecule exert a force on the walls of container. So first of all, if I suppose here is a container and inside this there is gas molecules. We know that gas molecules are further apart from each other. There is a large distance between their molecules and these molecules collide with each other and also with the walls of container. When they collide with the wall of container, they bounce back and travel in opposite direction. As a result, they change their direction. So there will be the change in momentum, that is delta P, which is the change in momentum. And we know that impulse is equal to F cross T, which is equal to delta P. So from here, force is equal to rate of change of momentum. When there is the change of momentum, so there will be the force exerted on the walls of container. So I write here, gas molecules collide with each other and also with walls of container. And then bounce back. So there will be change of momentum. This causes a force according to F is equal to delta P over T. Because force is equal to rate of change of momentum. So when there is a change of momentum, there will be the force. Part B. Figure 3.1 shows a glass tube containing mercury. Here is a figure 3.1 and we can see that there is a tube. Inside this there is a mercury filled and there is a point Q that is mentioned here. The mercury traps a fixed mass of the air in the left hand arm of the tube. The right hand arm of the tube is open to the atmosphere. The difference in the mercury levels in the two arms is h. H is actually the height. Part 1. The pressure of the atmosphere on the surface of the mercury in the right hand arm of the tube is 760 mm Hg. The distance h is 120 mm. Calculate the total pressure at level Q in millimeter of mercury, which is represented by mm and Hg due to the atmosphere and due to the mercury above Q. Going back to figure, here we can see that at a point Q, the total pressure will be the sum of pressure due to the mercury, that is from this section, and pressure due to the atmosphere, which is from this section. So we can get the total pressure at the point Q by adding both of these pressure. I write here total pressure will be equal to atmospheric pressure plus pressure due to mercury. The atmospheric pressure is given here, which is 760 millimeter of Hg, and the distance H is 120 millimeter. So the distance, this is basically 120 millimeter, and the atmospheric pressure here is 760 millimeter Hg. 760 millimeter Hg actually means that, I write here, it means that if there is a pressure exerted by the atmosphere, it will causes the mercury to rise in the barometer to the height of 760 millimeter. If I suppose that there is a mercury barometer, and inside this there is a tube, and there is mercury inside this. So 760 millimeter Hg means that the level of the liquid inside this tube will comes at 760 millimeter. The level of the mercury rises in the tube. And how much mercury rises? It depends upon the pressure on the surface of mercury. So here pressure is 760 millimeter Hg. It means that the level to which liquid rise is actually 760 millimeter. Same we apply this concept here in the case of pressure due to mercury. Here height is given, which is 120 millimeter. It means that the pressure due to the mercury 120 millimeter Hg. I write here the pressure due to the mercury here is 120 millimeter Hg. So the total pressure at the point Q will be the sum of both of these pressure. So I write here total pressure is equal to 760 plus 120, which is 880 millimeter Hg. It is the total pressure at point Q. So I write here pressure is equal to 880 millimeter Hg. Next part 2. State the pressure exerted by the air in the left hand arm of the tube. So here we have to find out the value of pressure on the left hand arm of the tube. In the figure 3.1 we can see that on the left hand arm the level of pressure is at this point, and this level is equal to the level of the liquid at point Q. And on the right hand side we have find out the pressure at the point Q. So the pressure on the left hand arm will be equal to the pressure at the point Q. So both of these pressures are equal. So I write here pressure is equal to 880 millimeter of Hg. Next part 3. Initially, the volume of the air trapped in the left-hand arm of the tube is 12 cubic centimeter. More mercury is poured into the right-hand arm of the tube. The volume of the trapped air decreases. The temperature does not change. The difference in the levels H becomes 240 millimeter. Calculate the new volume of the trapped gas. So here we have to find out the new volume, that is V2. When V1 is given, which is 12 centimeter cube, and also initial pressure P1 is that we calculate in the previous part when the height is 120 millimeter. So it will be 880 millimeter Hg, and when the volume decreases, the difference of height becomes 240 millimeter. It means that the final pressure changes, and it will be the sum of atmospheric pressure plus 240 millimeter Hg. So I write here P2 is equal to 760 millimeter Hg, which is due to the atmospheric pressure, plus 240, which is the new pressure that is exerted by the mercury. So it becomes 1000 millimeter Hg. And it is also given that temperature does not change. Here temperature is constant. So by using Boyle's law, in which pressure is inversely proportional to volume, by keeping the temperature constant. So I write here P1 V1 is equal to P2 V2. From here we have to find the value of V2. It will be P1 V1 over P2. So here P1, that is initial pressure, it is 880 multiplied by V1 is 12 divided by P2 is 1000. So that the new volume V2 comes to be 11 centimeter cube. So I write here volume is equal to 11 centimeter cube. Question number 4, part A. In an experiment, cooled water is poured into a bowl made of an insulating material. The container is placed in a draft-free room. After several hours, the volume and the temperature of the water are found to have decreased. So both the volume and temperature decrease. Name and describe the process that causes the decrease in the volume of the water and explain why the temperature of the water decrease. So here we have to explain that why the temperature of the water decrease. So first of all, here is evaporation. In the evaporation, the high energy molecules escape from the surface of liquid, leaving the molecules that has low energy. I am going to draw here diagram. So if I consider that here is the liquid inside this, the molecules that has high energy escape from the surface of liquid, leaving only the molecules that have low energy. So there is only the low energy molecules of the liquid here. As a result, the average kinetic energy of the molecules decrease, and kinetic energy is proportional to time. When the average kinetic energy decrease, the temperature of the system decrease. As a result, the volume and the temperature of the water decrease. I write here, there will be evaporation. And in the evaporation, molecules with high energy escape from surface of liquid, Molecules with low energy left behind. As a result, the average kinetic energy of the molecules decrease. And the temperature is directly proportional to the average kinetic energy. So, the decrease in average kinetic energy causes the temperature to decrease. So, I write here this causes the temperature to decrease. Part B. In the second experiment, using the same apparatus and the same initial amount of the cooled water as in part A, an electric fan blows air over the top of the bowl. Predict and explain how the result of this experiment compares with the result of the experiment in part A. So both of these experiments are similar, except that in the second experiment an electric fan blows air over the top of the bowl. So there will be the greater decrease in temperature in the second experiment because the fan removes vapors away, allowing more molecules to escape. As a result, there will be fast evaporation. So I write here, there will be greater decrease in temperature there will be greater decrease in temperature fan removes vapors away, allowing more molecules to escape. As a result, there will be fast evaporation. Next, part C. In the third experiment, the same initial amount of the cooled water as in part A is poured into a metal bowl. So in the third experiment, we use the metal bowl. The metal bowl is the same shape and size as the bowl used in part A. Compare with the experiment in part A, the decrease in temperature is less in the same time. Explain why. So in this case, the decrease in temperature is less as compared to the part 1. We have to explain its reason. So first of all, the bowl is made of metal and metal is a good conductor. I write here, metal is a good conductor. So as the metal is a good conductor, it passes heat to the liquid from the surrounding, causes its temperature to rise. So I write here, metal is a good conductor So it passes heat to the liquid from the surroundings. Causes its temperature to rise. Causes its temperature to rise. As a result, the decrease in temperature is less as compared to part A. Question number 5, part A. Compare the arrangement and the motion of molecules in ice and in liquid water. So here we have to compare the arrangement and motion of the molecules in both ice and liquid water. So in the ice, the molecules are arranged properly, while in the liquid water, there is irregular arrangement of the molecules. According to the molecular motion, the molecules in the ice vibrate at their fixed position, while in the water, the molecules move over each other or slide over each other. So I write here, in the ice, molecules are arranged properly. Molecules are arranged properly. So in the water, irregular arrangement of molecules. According to the molecular motion, the molecules in the ice vibrate at their fixed position. I write here, molecules vibrate at their fixed position and in the water, the molecules slide over each other. Next, part B. An ice hockey rink has an area of 1800 meters square. The ice has a thickness of 0.025 meter. The density of ice is 920 kg per meter cube. Part 1. Calculate the mass of the ice on the rink. So here we have to find out the mass of the ice, where density, area and thickness is given. We know that density is equal to mass per unit volume. I write here, density is equal to mass over volume. From here we have to find out the value of mass. So mass will be equal to product of density and volume. Here we don't given the value of volume. We can find out the volume from the area and the thickness. So I write here density multiplied by area and thickness. By putting values here, the value of mass is 920 multiplied by 1800 multiplied by 0.025. So that the value of mass comes to be 41,400 kilogram. It will be equal to 41,000 kilogram. So mass will be equal to 41,000 kilogram. Next, part 2. The ice is at 0 degrees C. To form the ice, water at 0 degrees C was poured onto the floor of the ring and then frozen. The specific latent heat of fusion of ice is 3.3 into 10 to the power 5 joule per kilogram. Calculate the energy removed from the water to form the ice at 0 degrees C. So here we have to find out the value of energy. So I write here energy will be equal to the product of mass and the specific latent heat of fusion L. By putting values here, mass that we already calculate in part 1, which is 41,400 multiplied by L, which is the specific latent heat of fusion of ice, 3.3 into 10 to the power 5. So that the value of energy comes to be 1.4 into 10 to the power 10 joule. We can also write 1.4 into 10 to the power 7 multiplied by 10 to the power 3 joule, which is equal to 1.4 into 10 to the power 7 kilojoule. So I write here energy is equal to 1.4 into 10 to the power 7 kilojoule. So this is the value of the energy removed from the water to form the ice at 0 degrees C. Question number 6, part A, first. State a typical value for the speed of sound in air. So here we have to write the value of the speed of sound in air. The speed of sound in the air ranges from 300 meter per second to 360 meter per second. I write here 300 to 360 meter per second. This is the value of the speed of sound in the air. So I write here speed is equal to 300 to 360 meter per second. Next, part 2. State the range of frequencies that can be heard by a healthy human ear. So here we have to state the range of frequencies that can be heard by the human ear. So the human ear can respond to the frequency ranges from 20 Hz to 20,000 Hz. I write here 20 to 20,000 Hz. It means that the range of frequency that can be heard by a healthy human ear is 20 Hz to 20,000 Hz. Next, part B. A sound wave in air has wavelength of 22 mm. So here wavelength is given. Figure 6.1 represents the wavefront of this sound. These wavefronts are successive compression. Here is the figure 6.1 and we can see that the wavelength is 22 mm. All of these are the successive compression and the distance between two successive compression, here it is 22 mm, which is also be known as the wavelength. Part 1. Using your value for the speed of sound in A, part 1, calculate the frequency of the sound wave. So here we have to calculate the frequency of the sound wave. First of all, I write here formula that speed of sound will be equal to frequency and lambda, which is the wavelength. From here we have to find out f. It will be equal to v over lambda. So we have to use the value for the speed of sound in part A first. Here we can see that the value of the speed of sound ranges from 300 to 360 meter per second. So I suppose that the speed is equal to 330 meter per second. I write here v is equal to 330 meter per second. So I write here 330 divided by lambda, which is the wavelength, and it is given that 22 millimeter. So I write here lambda is equal to 22 millimeter and we have to convert this millimeter into meters. So it will be 22 into 10 to the power minus 3 meters, which is equal to 0.022 meters. So I write here lambda is equal to 0.022 0.22 so that the value of frequency comes to be 15,000 Hertz. It means that frequency is equal to 15,000 Hertz or 15 kilohertz. Both of these are correct. Part 2. On figure 6.1, draw dotted lines to represent three different rarefactions. So on a figure 6.1, we have to draw the lines to show the rarefactions. Going back to figure, we can see here all of these are the successive compressions, and rarefaction is the region that is at the middle of the successive compression. Now I am going to draw the dotted line to show the rarefaction. So I draw this dotted line between two compressions. So this is first rarefaction. This is second rarefaction. And that is the last rarefaction. I also label here. While this solid line is compressions. Going towards the next part, part 3. State in terms of both molecules and pressure what is meant by rarefaction. So rarefaction is a region where the molecules are far apart, where the distance between the molecules are very large, and the pressure of the air molecules is below normal. So I write here the region where molecules are far apart and pressure of air molecules is below normal. Is called rarefaction. Question number 7. Figure 7.1 shows the box A, B, C, D. Here is the figure 7.1 and we can see that there is a box labeled as A, B, C and D. The box contains two identical glass prisms, one of which is shown. Light incident on prism 1 undergoes total internal reflection within the glass. So here will be the phenomena of total internal reflection. It means that there is no refraction. The light that is incident on the glass prism 1 is totally reflected. Part A. First, on figure 7.1, complete the path of the ray of light through the prism 1. So here we have to complete the path of the ray that enters through the prism 1. Going back to figure, we can see here that the ray of light is incident on the glass prism 1 and there will be total internal reflection. It means that this ray will be reflected. There will be no refraction. Now I am going to draw the path for this ray. So this is the path of the light. Next, there will be reflection. So the light from the prism 1 falls on the box 2. Now I draw the path of this here. This ray shows that there is total internal reflection. Next, part 2. On figure 7.1, draw a second prism inside the dashed sphere, positioned so that the light reflects inside the glass and emerges from the box as shown. Complete the path of the ray. So here, first of all, we have to draw the second prism inside this box that is shown by the dashed line, and then we have to complete the path of the ray that is incident on this. So first of all, I here draw prism. So I draw the prism inside this sphere. Then the light falls on this prism. I draw its path here. And then from here it emerges and it becomes the emergent ray. So this is a complete path of the light that enters into the prism 1 and after passing through the prism 2 emerges from the box. Going towards the next part B. Select the statement that correctly describe the necessary conditions for the light to undergo total internal reflection. Tick 2 boxes. For that we have to know about the total internal reflection. So total internal reflections occurs only when the angle of incidence is greater than the critical angle. And critical angle is basically the angle for which the angle of refraction becomes equal to 90 degrees. So first box here is the angle of incidence in the glass is less than the critical angle of the light in the glass. So this is incorrect because here the angle of incidence is less than the critical angle. So this condition is not true. Second, the angle of incidence in the glass is greater than the critical angle of the light in the glass. So here the angle of incidence is greater than the critical angle. So this is a condition for the total internal reflection. I tick the second box. Third, the angle of reflection in the glass is equal to the angle of refraction. So this is also incorrect because angle of reflection and angle of refractions are not equal. The speed of light in the glass is greater than the speed of light in the air. So it is also incorrect. Next is the speed of light in the glass is equal to the speed of light in the air. So the speed of light in the glass never be equal to the speed of light in the air. So this is also incorrect. And last one is the speed of light in the glass is less than the speed of light in the air. So this is correct. That is the speed of light in glass is less than the speed of light in the air. I take the last one. Question number 8. A battery is made up of 8 cells in series. Each cell has an EMF of 1.5 volt. The battery is connected to one 8.0 ohm resistor for 40 minutes. Part A. Calculate the EMF of the battery. So the total EMF of the battery will be equal to the total number of cells multiplied by the EMF of each cell. So I write here total EMF of battery will be equal to total number of cells multiplied by the EMF of each cell. It will be equal to the total number of cells are 8 multiplied by the EMF of each cell is 1.5. So that the value of EMF of the battery comes to be 12 volt. I write here EMF is equal to 12 volt. Next part B. Calculate the energy transferred from the battery in 40 minutes. So here we have to find out the value of energy that is transferred from the battery in 40 minutes. So first of all, we know that power is the product of current and potential difference. I write here power is equal to current multiplied by potential difference, or in our case here is EMF. I write here I and V. Also power is equal to rate of transfer of energy, that is energy over time. By comparing both of these equations, I write energy over time is equal to I and V, where E is equal to I V multiplied by T. So here current we have to find out by using the Ohm's law, that is V is equal to IR. First of all, I find out the value of current. It will be equal to V over R, where V is EMF and it is calculated in part A, which is equal to 12 divided by resistance is given, that is 8.0 ohm. So I write here 8.0. The value of current comes to be 1.5 ampere. Now I am going to put the value of current into equation of energy, so that energy will be equal to 1.5 multiplied by the EMF is 12 volt and time is given, which is 40 minutes, and we have to convert 40 minutes into into seconds. So I write here 40 multiplied by 60, so that the value of energy comes to be 43,000 joule. I write here energy is equal to 43,000 joule. Next part C. Describe the energy changes that take place during the 40 minutes. So here we have to describe that what energy changes happens during 40 minutes. So first of all, here is the battery and resistor. Battery convert the chemical energy into electrical energy. I write here battery and resistor. Battery changes chemical energy into electrical energy. While the resistor changes the electrical energy to thermal or heat energy. So these are energy changes that take place during the 40 minutes. I write here chemical energy, to electrical energy, in battery, and electrical energy to thermal energy in resistor. Question number 9. Figure 9.1 shows a gardener cutting damp grass with a high-powered electric mower. Here is a figure 9.1 and we can see that there is a gardener and here is the electric mower. There is also the cut in the insulation which is covered with the tape which is at this position, and there is also the plug. The extension cables with thin wires is also shown here, and here is the damp grass. The mover cable has thick wires appropriate for the current of the mover and the correct fuse. This cable is too short and so the gardener uses an extension cable with thin wire intended for use with a reading lamp. This cable has no fuse. Discuss any danger of the electrical arrangement shown in figure 9.1. It is given that the cable has no fuse. So if the thin extension cables carry too large current, it may overheat, and as it does not have any fuse, so it may cause fire. So first of all, I write here if thin extension cable carries too large current, it may overheat. As the cable has no fuse, so it may cause fire. It may cause fire. Next is that as the wire is thin, if the cable is cut by the mover and there is no electric circuit breaker, it may cause electric shock due to the moisture because the grass is damp. So I write here as wire is thin, if cable is cut by mover, and there is no circuit breaker, it may cause electric shock due to moisture. So these are the dangers of the electrical arrangement that is shown in figure 9.1. Question number 10. Figure 10.1 shows a wire AB suspended on the two spots so that it is between the poles of a strong magnet. The wire AB is loosely held so that it is free to move. Here is the figure 10.1. Here is the figure 10.1 and we can see that there is a wire AB and there is also the magnetic field which is provided by the magnet. It has two poles, North Pole and South Pole. The ends of the wire AB is connected with the power supply which is shown here. Describe and explain any movement of the wire AB when there is part A, large direct current which is DC in the wire in the direction from A to B. So when there is a large current passing through the wire from A to B, we have to explain any movement of the wire AB. So here current is given in this direction. So first of all, magnetic field is also exist here which is from north to south. So by applying the Fleming left hand rule, I write here according to Fleming left hand rule, if I consider my left hand and keep thumb, forefinger and middle finger mutually perpendicular to each other, then points my forefinger in the direction of magnetic field and middle finger in the direction of current. Then my thumb represents the direction of force. First of all, here current is from point A to B, means that from left to right. Magnetic field here the magnetic field is from north to south. It means that the magnetic field is into the page. So according to the Fleming left hand rule, forefinger points in the direction of magnetic field and middle finger in the direction of current. Then thumb will indicate the direction of force. By applying this rule, I observe that the force is in upward direction and it is vertically upward. It means that the wire AB moves vertically upward. So I write here, according to Fleming left hand rule, wire AB moves vertically upwards magnetic field is into the page. The direction of magnetic field is into the page from north to south. This is the case when direct current passing through the wire. Part B. a large alternating current, that is AC current, in the wire. So in this case, when the alternating current passing through the wire, there exists the magnetic field. So I suppose here that I have this wire and current is passing in upward direction. There will be the magnetic field that is circular. It means that magnetic field exists around the current carrying wire. And when this wire is placed in the magnetic field, that is here shown by the magnet, on which two poles north and south are shown. When this wire is placed in the magnet, the magnetic field of the magnet and magnetic field of the wire, both of these interact with each other, due to which there is a force on the wire, and this force will be vertically upward and downward, because here is alternating that changes its polarity again and again. So the wire moves vertically up and down in the form of vibration, because the vertical force on the wire alternates due to the interaction to magnetic field, the magnetic field due to the magnet, and the other magnetic field that is due to the current carrying wire. So I write here, the wire moves vertically up and down in the form of vibration, vertical force on wire AB alternates due to interaction of two magnetic fields. Due to alternating current passing in the wire and due to U-shaped magnet. Question number 11, part A. State what is meant by part 1, electric field. So here we have to define the electric field. Electric field is a region where the force acts on a charge. If I suppose that here is a charge Q and the region around the charge where the electric force acts on the charge is known as electric field. This region is shaded by this. So this whole region is basically the electric field. I write here the region where force acts on a charge. Part 2, the direction of an electric field at a point. So here we have to describe the direction of the electric field at a point. So the direction of electric field will be in the direction of force acting on the positive charge. So I write here the direction of electric field is in the direction of force acting on positive charge. Part B. Figure 11.1 shows a positively charged sphere. Here is a figure 11.1 and we can see that there is a sphere on which positive charge is spread. On figure 11.1, draw the pattern of the electric field in the region around the positively charged sphere. Show the direction of the field with arrows. So here we have to draw the direction of the electric field in the region around the positively charged sphere. So first of all, we know that the electric field lines emerges from the positive charge and enters into the negative charge. I write here electric field lines emerge from positive charge and enters into negative charge. Now I am going to draw these electric field lines. I use a ruler and draw here the lines. I also have to put arrow in outward direction. So this is the pattern of the electric field lines due to the positively charged sphere. We can also draw here the electric field lines due to other positive charges. Next, part C. The charge on the sphere in part B is 2.0 into 10 to the power minus 5 coulomb. So here the charge on the sphere is given, which is 2.0 into 10 to the power minus 5 coulomb. A high resistance wire is now connected between the sphere and the earth. It takes 20 minutes for the sphere to become completely discharged through the wire. Part 1 suggests why there is a current in the wire between the sphere and the earth. So first of all, I consider here is a sphere and it is positively charged. When I connect this sphere with the earth, then what will happen? The positive charges on the sphere attract the electron from the earth, due to which the electrons moving towards the sphere and both positive and negative charges neutralize and the positively charged sphere now become neutral. It discharges through the wire. So there is the flow of charges, due to which there is a potential difference between the sphere and the earth due to the flow of charges. So I write here, there is a potential difference between sphere and earth due to flow of charges. Next, part 2. Calculate the average current in the wire between the sphere and the earth. So here we have to find out the value of the average current, where charge on the sphere and the time is also given. So I use the formula that current is the rate of flow of charges, that is I is equal to Q over T, where charges is 2.0 into 10 की power minus 5 coulomb divided by time. Time here is given 20 minutes and we have to convert 20 minutes into seconds. So I multiply it with 60. 20 multiplied by 60. So the value of current comes to be 1.7 into 10 की power minus ampere. The unit of current is ampere. So the average current will be equal to 1.7 into 10 की power minus 8 ampere. So this is a value of the average current in the wire between the sphere and the earth. Question number 12. The nuclear equation below shows the decay of plutonium, whose symbol is Pu, nucleus to the americium, and its symbol is Am, nucleus, and beta particle. Here is a nuclear equation which shows the decay of plutonium into americium and beta particle. Pu has atomic mass 241, while the atomic number is shown by symbol Z. While the americium has atomic number 95, while the mass number is 241, and there is also the beta particles. Part A, first, state the quantity that is represented by the letter Z in this equation. So Z here is basically the atomic number and it is equal to the number of protons. So I write here atomic number R, number of protons. Part 2, state the numerical value of Z. So here we have to write the value of Z. For that we have to check the atomic number on both sides of the arrow. So I write here first of all that beta particles are just like electron and its mass number is 0, atomic number is -1. So we check the atomic number on both sides of this arrow. I write here atomic number is equal to, on the left hand side it is Z, while on the right hand side it is 95. For beta particle it is -1, so it will be 94. So Z is equal to 94. I write here Z is equal to 94. Part B, the americium nucleus decays by the emission of an alpha particles into the neptunium, whose symbol is Np, nucleus. Complete the nuclear equation for this decay. So we have to complete this equation. It is given that americium decays into alpha particle. So I write here alpha particle. It is just like the helium nuclei, whose symbol is He with atomic number 2, while the mass number is 4. So I write here helium 4 and 2 plus the second element is Np, and we have to find out the atomic number and atomic mass of Np. So I suppose I write here X and Y. Now I am going to check the atomic number and atomic mass on both sides of this arrow. First of all, I write here atomic number. On left hand side, atomic number is 95. It will be equal to the atomic number on right hand side. It will be 2 plus Y. We have to find out the value of Y. It will be 95 minus 2, which is 93. It means that atomic number of Np is 93. I write here 93. Next we have to find out the mass number. So here will be mass number. It will be equal to 241. It is equal to 4 plus X. So here we have to find out the value of x. It will be 241 minus 4, which is equal to 237. So I write here x is equal to 237. So we have complete the nuclear equation for the decay of immersion with the emission of alpha particle. Next part C. The half-life of this immersion nuclide is 470 years. A sample of this nuclide contains 8.0 into 10 to the power 14 atoms. After some time, 6.0 into 10 to the power 14 immersion atoms have decayed. Calculate the time required for this decay. So here we have to find out the time that is required for this decay. Means that we have to find out the half-life. First of all, I make a table here. So first of all, I write here number of atoms. And here we can see that it is multiple of 10 to the power 14. So I also write multiple of 10 to the power 14. Next is time, which is given in years. So first of all, half-life of immersion nucleus is given, which is 470 years. And initially the sample of the nuclide contains 8.0 into 10 to the power 14 atoms. It means that when time is 0 years, number of atoms are 8.0. Next, when first half-life pass, it means that time is 470 years. Then half of this amount decay and it becomes 8.0 divided by 2, which is 4.0. Next, when second half-life pass, it means that total time will be 2 into 470, which is equal to 940 years. So I write here when second half-life pass means that 940 years passes. Then the half of this amount again decay and it becomes 4.0 divided by 2, which is 2.0. It means that 2.0 into 10 to the power 14 atoms left behind. And it is given that after some time 6.0 into 10 to the power 14 immersion atoms have decayed. So I write first of all here number of atoms decay will be equal to initial number of atoms minus number of atoms left behind. So it will be 8.0 into 10 to the power 14 minus 2.0 into 10 to the power 14. It means that 6.0 into 10 to the power 14 atoms decay when second half-life pass. it means that the total time is 940 years. For the decay of immerium, so I write here time is equal to 940 years.